Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I wanted to talk about some authors that I am going to be leaving behind in 2022. So this is going to be authors that I just don't see myself reading from in the future. Obviously, like, never say never, and maybe they will come out with a book that I just have to read. But I have 7 authors on this list that I am like 95% sure I will never read another book from, and then I have 2 that I'm a little more like 70-30 on whether I'd read a book from them or not again. So that is going to be today's video, so let's just get right into it. So I'm going to start with the authors that I definitely don't think I will be reading from again, and the first 2 are going to be sort of obvious if you've watched another one of my videos, which I'm not sure if it's out yet because all this pre-filming has gotten me a little mixed up. But I am doing a video where I gave authors I didn't like a second chance, and there were 2 from that video that I know I will not be reading from again. The first one is Libby Hubsher. I just am not vibing with any of her books, I find. I read 2 of them now. One of them was incredibly depressing, and the second one was definitely women's fiction and not a romance. And I think both of them really were more women's fiction than romance, and I hate that. And so I really don't think that I will ever pick up anything from this author again because I was just incredibly disappointed by both of those books. So I think Libby is definitely a author that I will not be picking up another book from in the future. Next is another one from that video, and it is Elena Armas. I read both of her books, The Spanish Love Deception and The American Roommate Experiment. When I read The Spanish Love Deception, I didn't love it. I thought it was okay, but I really didn't think it was worth the hype. I thought it was way too long and could have used like a really serious editor going through it. I really remember there being like scenes in that book that just didn't need to be there. Like, I know at the beginning there's like a date auction or something, and it really served no purpose to the plot line or the book or anything. Like, it didn't need to be in there, and yet it was. And there was also like, I think at least one entire chapter on them playing some sort of like sports game. I want to say it was like soccer or something, but I don't even remember, with her family or his family, and I was just like, why do we need the entire play-by-play of how this game is going? Like, it just was very long for no reason. And because of that, I did sort of keep an open mind when her second book came out, because I was like, okay, you know what, the first one was independently published, it was her first book, maybe she just like didn't have a good editor, didn't have access to the resources like needed to, you know, shape it into a really good book. And so I was willing to give her second book a shot, and I did read it, and I actually thought it was worse than The Spanish Love Deception, so apparently having the whole team doesn't really change much. I found this one was incredibly boring. It was also just as long as The Spanish Love Deception and didn't need to be. There was nothing memorable about this book at all. Like, I literally don't remember one single cute thing that happened in this. I remember that they were accidental roommates and they're like sort of going on these like fake dates, but not really, because she's just trying to write a book, so she's like getting inspiration from these dates. I was just consistently bored throughout this one. I honestly just couldn't care less, to be honest, and didn't love it. So I'm really not interested in seeing what else she's gonna write, because at this point I've hated both of them, so I'm just not really interested in reading anything else that she has to write. Next is Kendall Ryan. I feel like I get her mixed up a lot with Kennedy Ryan because their names are so close. Kennedy Ryan I would read from. I tend to avoid her books just because they're very emotional and I really don't like that. But Kendall Ryan, I read a lot of her books when I first got into romance. The Hot Jocks series in particular is a hockey romance series she wrote. I read the entire series and loved it at the time, but honestly now looking back, I have a feeling I would absolutely hate it, because there's just like a certain vibe to her books that to me I find, I don't know how I'm gonna explain this well, but to me there's like a certain vibe to some of the indie published Amazon books, particularly a lot of the ones that you can get for free. Sometimes they all are very almost like formulaic, in that it almost seems like someone said like, oh, like writing a romance is so easy, like let me do it, and they all kind of have that same vibe to them. And I didn't catch that when I was reading her books the first, you know, time around, but now that I've read a lot of other books, I feel like her books definitely have that vibe and I just don't like it. And I tried picking up her newer hockey series. I think it was called The Rebel was the first book. I DNF'd it because honestly I just got like maybe halfway in and I didn't even care if the couple got together, because I just didn't care about anything that was happening in the book. It was just not interesting, and I feel like she's definitely an author that I am not really interested in picking anything else up from, because I just think that all of her books would probably be like that now. And while I didn't catch it the first time around because I was very new to the genre, I think now it would really irritate me a lot more. Next is Jessa Hastings. I have a whole video on this as well. I don't think this one is out yet, of my review of this series that she's written, which is the Magnolia Parks universe. And I thought the first one was okay. I couldn't decide if I loved it or hated it. I was really sort of on the fence. And then I read the second one, Daisy Hates, and I absolutely hated it. And for me, the reason this author made this list wasn't even the plot content of the books. It was more so the fact that I absolutely cannot stand her writing. Like, I find it is so incredibly annoying to read. She doesn't write properly, I feel like, which is like a weird way to say it, but like, she just, it's not grammatically correct, I guess, is the best way to put it. She will like leave words out of sentences just because she feels like it, and it's just like, I don't know, it really bothers me. And then all the footnotes in Daisy Hates, I was like, okay, never again, like, I'm not doing this. I don't like the constant nicknames and, you know, swapping out people's names for no reason. Like, I just literally, everything about her writing style bothered me. She doesn't tell you who the text messages are between in her books, which makes no sense to me. Like, why would you not tell the reader that? I just, like, literally cannot stand her writing style. And so I think even if she were to write a book that sounded like the most perfect book for me, I still would not pick it up because I genuinely cannot stand her writing. And so I think this is like probably the one person on this list I can honestly say I will never pick up a book from again, because I just don't want to do that to myself. This next one I feel like is sort of an unpopular opinion and is probably going to get me some flack. But I feel like I genuinely will never read another Taylor Jenkins Reid book again. I really just think she's not for me. I have read Malibu Rising, and at the time I gave it like 4 stars. I thought it was good, but honestly it was very unmemorable because I barely even remember what it was about, other than like, I think they're having a party. That was literally the only thing I remember. And then I read One True Loves recently, which I was really excited for. I was expecting to be absolutely blown away by that book, because it's about this woman whose husband basically disappears, and she assumes he's dead. She moves on with her life and ends up getting engaged to this other guy. And then her husband shows up like a year or 2 later, whatever it is, and he's like, I'm back, like, I've been waiting for you. And she's like, okay, well, I'm engaged to this other guy now. And he's kind of like, well, but of course you're gonna dump him and get back with me because we were meant to be together and whatever. And I was expecting this to be truly like gut-wrenching. Like, I was expecting to be completely distraught, like deciding between these 2 guys and like who she was gonna get with, and I thought it was gonna be crazy emotional, and it was just none of that. This was one of the most shallow books I've ever read. I don't know, I was expecting a lot more from this book, and I think from her in general, because she's so hyped and everyone raves about her books so much, and I just found they were very basic. And so I'm not really interested in picking any of her other books up. I do own Daisy Jones and the Six, but honestly I don't know that I'll ever read it. I thought about picking up The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but honestly after One True Loves I was just so disappointed that I really just don't see me picking up any of her other books anymore, because I just don't think they live up to the hype, to be honest. Next is another one that I feel like is kind of obvious if you've been on my channel this year, and that is Hazel Beck. This is actually 2 authors that co-write under this name. I won't read anything from either them together or them separate after reading the one book I read that they wrote together. If you haven't heard of Small Town Big Magic, I bash it a lot on my channel because it is definitely the worst book that I read this year, 1000%. And so I would never ever pick up another book by these authors, literally ever again. Truly a terrible book, and I've never been so angry after reading a book in my entire life. So I really have no interest in picking up any of their other books. Next is Penelope Ward, and I feel like I read a lot of Penelope Ward's books when I first got into reading. I think she was very popular in like maybe like the 2017 book era, and she had a lot of books out at the time. She writes a lot with Vi Keeland as well, which I've read a lot of their joint books as well. But I feel like the last couple times I've picked up a Penelope Ward book, I have just been like very disappointed in it. I find her books are just never like fleshed out correctly, if that makes any sense. Probably doesn't, but like the last book I read by her was doing really well up until the middle point, and then all of a sudden there was like this weird shift and everything changed and it was just not good anymore, and I didn't love that. I sort of have gotten that vibe with a couple of her books where I find the setup is really good but the execution just falls flat somewhere along there. And so because of that, I'm not sure that I would pick up another one of her books. I haven't really been reading her new stuff, I don't think. I think a lot of the stuff I'm reading is like her older books, so maybe her newer stuff is better, I don't know. But I'm just like not really interested in picking up her books because I think I've given like 3 in a row 2 stars now, so just not an author that I think I'll be gravitating towards in the future. Next are the 2 authors that I was saying that I am not like totally sold on never reading from again, but are definitely ones that I feel like are starting to phase out of my interests. The first one is Elle Kennedy. I loved the Off Campus and Briar U series, but everything else I've read from her has just been like okay. And I find her traditionally published stuff in particular is not nearly as good as like Off Campus was, obviously, but I just like I don't like the direction that I sort of see her writing headed, and because of that I don't think I'm like in any kind of rush to pick up her new stuff. I'll probably read the 3rd Avalon Bay book, but more so just because I've already kind of started the series, not because I'm like dying to get my hands on it or anything. And I find that like she came out with that new book Misfit or something, and that was just like not up my alley at all. Like I wasn't even excited about that one, didn't order it or read it or anything, and I think that I was not alone in that because I have not seen anyone talking about that book, which is sad because like obviously Briar U and Off Campus did so well for her, but I just find that like with her traditionally published stuff it's just very, very basic, which is kind of what people don't like about traditionally published to begin with. I don't know, I just feel like with Elle Kennedy, like she's capable of better than what she's currently producing, and I mean, I don't know, like I don't want to say it's because she's traditionally published now, because obviously like publishing has its place in the world, but at the same time I kind of feel like it does like coincide with when her stuff kind of went downhill. So maybe that's just a coincidence, I don't know, but I find her stuff now is very, very basic and like been done before kind of things. But like I said, I wouldn't be opposed to reading another Elle Kennedy book. I'm just not, you know, in a rush to pick up her newest releases anymore. And lastly is Abby Glines. I feel like I was really into Abby Glines when I first got into reading 2 years ago, and I read a ton of her books, and honestly like I still have read a ton of her books. Obviously I read the entire Rosemary Beach series, the Seabury series, the Field Party books. I've read all but the last 2, and I've read a couple of her other like oddball books, but honestly I find the last couple that I've read just like haven't been that great. Like Lyrics of a Small Town I kind of hated because the girl, I believe if I remember right in that book, the girl spends more time with another guy than the one she's actually dating, and the one she ends up dating gets jealous of her hanging out with this other guy when really there was no reason for him to be, and that just like was irritating for me. And so I didn't love that one, and I've read a couple of her others that I didn't really love, and I haven't heard the best things about Going Too Far, which is like her newest release, which is part of the Rosemary Beach series. But I just like, I don't know, I'm kind of iffy on her now. Like I have enjoyed some of her books. I do go back and read the Seabreeze books quite often. They're still some of my favorites, but I just find her newer stuff isn't as exciting to me as it used to be, so it's kind of sad. But that is everything for today's video, so thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. I'm currently doing new book videos every single day, and I will see you next time.